Welcome back to Infidelity Tales Lab. We're incredibly grateful for your support. Before we begin today's tale, tell us, which city or country are you joining us from? We love connecting with our global audience. Now, let's dive into today's story. Chapter 1. The Ceremony. The Maxwell Harris Award for Innovation in Security Systems glinted under the chandeliers of the Grand Meridian Hotel ballroom. Dominic Voss stood backstage, straightening his tie in a mirror that reflected back 15 years of relentless work. At 42, his salt and pepper hair and the faint scar above his right eyebrow told stories of his time in naval intelligence before founding Sentinel Solutions. 5 minutes, Mr. Voss, the event coordinator said, clipboard in hand. Dominic nodded, his steel blue eyes scanning the crowd through the curtain gap. He spotted Vanessa immediately, his wife of 12 years, her auburn hair cascading over the emerald dress he'd bought for their anniversary. Even after all these years, the sight of her still stirred something in him. 12 years, 1 daughter, 3 homes, and countless sacrifices. Phoenix Sentinel, the software he'd developed that revolutionized threat detection in high-security facilities, had finally earned him industry-wide recognition. Tonight was supposed to be their victory. "You built this from nothing," Theodore Bull Kazan said, clapping a massive hand on Dominic's shoulder. Bull had been with him since Annapolis, followed him through 3 deployments, and became his head of operations when they transitioned to civilian life. "We built it," Dominic corrected him. "Your name's on that award, not mine," Bull chuckled. "Speaking of which, where's Isabel?" Dominic frowned. Their 16-year-old daughter had promised to be here. She texted an hour ago. Debate team ran late. The coordinator returned. "Mr. Voss, we're ready for you." As Dominic moved toward the stage, he noticed his wife slipping away from their table. She approached the bar where Lawrence Kessler stood. His new boss since Axion Defense Systems had acquired Sentinel Solutions last month. The acquisition had been Vanessa's idea. "We've taken it as far as we can," she'd insisted. "It's time to cash out." Dominic had resisted initially, but the 9-figure offer had been too substantial to dismiss. Still, something about relinquishing control to Axion unsettled him. The presenter began his introduction, but Dominic's attention remained fixed on Vanessa and Lawrence. They hadn't met before. Why wasn't she at their table waiting for his moment? He watched as Vanessa extended her hand to Lawrence, her body language shifting subtly. The tilt of her head, the light touch on Lawrence's arm as she laughed, signals Dominic recognized from when she'd first pursued him. Revolutionized security infrastructure worldwide. Please welcome Dominic Voss. Applause erupted, forcing Dominic's attention back to the ceremony. He stepped onto the stage, accepted the award, and delivered his prepared speech, all while part of his mind remained at the bar with his wife and Lawrence Kessler. After the speech, Dominic made his way through congratulatory handshakes toward Vanessa, but was intercepted repeatedly. By the time he approached the bar, neither Vanessa nor Lawrence was anywhere to be seen. "Looking for someone?" Bull appeared beside him. "Vanessa was just here with Kessler. I saw them head toward the garden terrace," Bull said, a hint of concern in his voice. Something cold settled in Dominic's stomach. He moved toward the terrace doors, slipping past clusters of industry elites. The night air hit him as he stepped outside, the garden illuminated by strategic lighting that left intimate pockets of shadow. He heard Vanessa's distinctive laugh before he saw them, partially obscured by a large topiary. Lawrence stood too close to her, his hand resting on the small of her back. "I can't believe I've never met you at any company functions," Lawrence was saying. "Dominic keeps you well hidden." "That's because I'm not his wife," Vanessa replied, her voice carrying clearly in the night air. Dominic froze. "Separated?" Lawrence asked. "Let's just say available," Vanessa smiled. "I'm keeping my options open." Lawrence leaned closer. "Your husband must be an idiot to let you out alone." "I'm not married to an idiot anymore," Vanessa said with a laugh that sliced through Dominic like a blade. The weight of the award in Dominic's hand suddenly felt like lead. 12 years. He had missed Isabel's first steps because he was coding Phoenix Sentinel's core architecture. He had spent their 10th anniversary in a secure facility in Dubai, closing their biggest contract. "Actually," Dominic said, stepping from the shadows, "she is." Vanessa's expression transformed from flirtatious to shocked in an instant. Lawrence straightened, professional mask sliding back into place. Dominic, I was just congratulating. I heard exactly what you were doing. Dominic cut him off, his voice eerily calm. And what my wife was saying. Vanessa recovered quickly. Dom, don't be ridiculous. Lawrence and I were just. I'm not here to make a scene, Dominic said, his gaze boring into Vanessa. I simply wanted to let you know that I was looking for you, so we could leave. Isabel texted, she's waiting at home. Mr. Voss, Lawrence began, I assure you. Mr. Kessler, Dominic interrupted, we have a 9 o'clock meeting tomorrow to discuss the integration of Phoenix Sentinel into Axion's portfolio. I suggest we keep our relationship professional. Dominic turned and walked away, the weight of Vanessa's betrayal pressing down on him with each step. He didn't look back to see if she followed. In his mind, calculations were already beginning, silent, methodical, and precise. The instincts that had kept him alive in hostile territories now focused on a new mission. By the time Vanessa caught up to him at the valet stand, his decision was made. He would obtain evidence, secure assets, and prepare the battlefield. The woman beside him was no longer his wife, but an adversary who had made a critical miscalculation. Dom, you're overreacting, Vanessa hissed as they waited. It was just harmless flirting. Dominic looked at her, really looked at her, for the first time in years. The woman he'd built a life with now seemed like a stranger wearing a familiar face. What would you call telling another man you're not married? He asked quietly. A joke, obviously, she said, rolling her eyes. God, when did you become so insecure? Their car arrived, and they rode home in silence. When they pulled into their driveway, the house was dark. No Isabel. Vanessa checked her phone. She's staying at Mia's to work on their debate presentation. Another lie, Dominic thought. Isabel had texted him directly that she was coming home. The pieces were falling into place, and the picture they formed made his blood run cold. Later that night, while Vanessa slept, Dominic slipped into his home office. He opened a hidden safe behind a framed Navy commendation and removed a thumb drive containing contingency plans he had created years ago, a habit from his military days that he'd never abandoned. He inserted the drive into his computer and opened a file labeled Scorched Earth. The document contained detailed protocols for worst-case scenarios, including personal betrayal. He had created it hoping never to use it, but as the famous military adage went, hope for the best, plan for the worst. Dominic began to type, updating the protocol. By the time dawn broke over their suburban home, Phase 1 was ready to implement. What Vanessa didn't know was that while she had been dismissing his concerns, Dominic had been standing right behind her at the bar earlier in the evening, divorce papers already in his briefcase. Papers he had prepared weeks ago when his first suspicions arose. What she also didn't know was that unlike the man she had married, the man she had betrayed would never forgive and never forget. Chapter 2, Veiled Truths. The morning after the award ceremony, Dominic was already at his desk when his assistant, Renata Summers, arrived at 7:30 a.m. Tall and efficient with a photographic memory, Renata had been with him since Sentinel's early days, turning down numerous offers from competitors over the years. You're early, she observed, setting his preferred black coffee on his desk. Especially after your big night. I need you to clear my schedule today, Dominic said without preamble. And I need absolute discretion on something personal. Renata's professional demeanor never wavered. Of course. I'm initiating Operation Watchman, he said, referencing their code for highest-level confidentiality. I need surveillance on Vanessa and comprehensive background on Lawrence Kessler, personal and professional. To her credit, Renata asked no questions about why he needed his wife under surveillance. I'll contact Finch, she said, referring to the former MI6 operative who occasionally handled sensitive matters for Sentinel. No, use Maddox for Vanessa, Dominic countered. She knows him socially. She'll never suspect him. And I want Bull to handle Kessler. Renata nodded. What about the Axion integration meeting at 9? I'll attend. Act normal. But afterward, I want you to quietly pull together all documents related to my personal assets and Phoenix Sentinel's proprietary codebase. Are you having second thoughts about the acquisition? She asked. Just covering bases, Dominic replied, though his mind was already calculating how to leverage the acquisition to his advantage in what was coming. After Renata left, Dominic pulled up the security system for their home. He had installed it himself, a modified version of Phoenix Sentinel adapted for residential use. Most of the household staff believed it was simply an advanced alarm system. Only Dominic knew it recorded everything. He accessed logs from the past 3 months, specifically when he had been traveling for business. The data painted a clear picture. Vanessa had not been alone during his absences. The same vehicle, a black Range Rover registered to Lawrence Kessler, had visited their home 6 times when Dominic was away. Even more disturbing was what he discovered about Isabel's supposed debate team activities. His daughter had indeed been on the debate team, until 2 months ago when she quit, but continued to use it as an excuse to be away from home. Her location data, which she didn't know he could access, showed she had been spending time at an address in downtown registered to one Callum Reed, a 20-year-old college sophomore. Dominic felt a stab of regret. Had he been so focused on building Sentinel that he'd missed his daughter growing up and his marriage falling apart? No, he refused to accept sole blame. He had provided everything, been faithful, supported their dreams. The betrayal was theirs, not his. The 9 o'clock meeting with Axion executives was a masterclass in compartmentalization. Dominic presented integration plans for Phoenix Sentinel with perfect composure, even as Lawrence Kessler avoided direct eye contact. I must say, Dominic, Lawrence said as the meeting concluded, your attention to detail is impressive. Almost like you anticipated every possible contingency. That's exactly what Phoenix Sentinel does, Lawrence, Dominic replied with a thin smile. It anticipates threats before they materialize. By afternoon, information began flowing in. Bull had uncovered that Lawrence Kessler had a pattern of pursuing the wives of men whose companies Axion acquired. In 3 previous cases, marriages had ended in divorce shortly after acquisitions. Maddox's initial surveillance revealed something even more damning. Vanessa had met Lawrence for lunch, then accompanied him to the Westin Hotel downtown. They emerged 2 hours later. The final blow came from Renata's findings on their finances. Vanessa had been systematically transferring small amounts from their joint accounts to a private account for over a year, accumulating nearly $300,000. There's more, Renata said, closing his office door. I found emails between Vanessa and Kessler dating back 6 months before the acquisition talks began. She approached him first, suggesting Sentinel might be available. The pieces clicked into place. Vanessa hadn't just been unfaithful. She had orchestrated the entire acquisition to maximize her financial gain before leaving him. That evening, Dominic returned home earlier than usual. Vanessa was surprised to find him in the kitchen, preparing dinner. What's the occasion? She asked cautiously. Can't a man cook for his wife? Dominic replied, his voice neutral as he poured her a glass of her favorite wine. Vanessa studied him. About last night? I'm sorry if I embarrassed you. Already forgotten, Dominic lied smoothly. I overreacted. The pressure of the acquisition has been getting to me. Relief washed over Vanessa's face. I'm glad you understand. I would never do anything to hurt you, Dom. Dominic smiled as he served the salmon he knew she loved. I know. By the way, I've been thinking about that vacation you want to take. Why don't we go to Bora Bora next month? Just the 2 of us. Really? Vanessa's eyes lit up. What about the Axion transition? Some things are more important, Dominic said, raising his glass. To us. As they clinked glasses, Dominic watched her sip the wine, unaware that he was already moving his most valuable assets beyond her reach. By morning, his personal offshore accounts would be reconfigured. The trust fund he had established for Isabel would be protected with new conditions, and the true value of Phoenix Sentinel's intellectual property would be secured in ways the acquisition agreement hadn't detected. Later, when Isabel came home, Dominic invited her into his study, something he rarely did. How's debate team? He asked casually. Isabel shifted uncomfortably. Good. We're preparing for state finals. Interesting, Dominic said, sliding a folder across his desk. Because according to the coach, you quit 2 months ago. The color drained from Isabel's face. Who is Callum Reed? He asked quietly. Dad, The truth, Isabel. Now, for the next hour, his daughter tearfully explained how she had been seeing Callum secretly because she knew neither of her parents would approve of the age difference. What truly stunned Dominic was her revelation that Vanessa knew about Callum. "Mom said she'd keep it from you if I covered for her sometimes," Isabel admitted. When she said she was with her friends, but wasn't, Dominic maintained his composure, even as rage built inside him. Vanessa had used their daughter as an accomplice in her deception. "Are you going to forbid me from seeing him?" Isabel asked finally. Dominic considered his response carefully. "No, but I want to meet him properly. And no more lies from either of us. Deal." Isabel's relief was palpable. "Deal." As his daughter left the study, Dominic added another layer to his developing plan. Vanessa had not just betrayed him. She had corrupted their daughter's moral compass. The price for that would be even steeper. That night, while Vanessa slept beside him, Dominic finalized the details of Phase 2. The surveillance equipment Maddox had placed in Lawrence Kessler's office and home was already feeding data to a secure server. The banking algorithms he had designed were tracking financial movements, and the divorce papers in his safe had been updated with new information. The husband Vanessa thought she knew. The workaholic who could be manipulated, the man who would forgive to maintain appearances, was a fabrication. The real Dominic Voss, the strategist who had once orchestrated counterintelligence operations in hostile territory, was now fully awakened. And he never forgave betrayal. Chapter 3. The Architect. For the next 2 weeks, Dominic Voss lived a double life with surgical precision. To the outside world, including Vanessa, he was a devoted husband working through the Axion acquisition, planning their Bora Bora vacation, and even attending marriage counseling at Vanessa's suggestion. Behind this carefully constructed facade, he architected her downfall with the same methodical approach that had built Phoenix Sentinel. "The surveillance is comprehensive," Bull reported during a secure meeting at a warehouse Sentinel owned off books. "Kessler and Vanessa meet 3 times a week, usually at the Westin. They're getting careless." Dominic nodded, reviewing the surveillance photos spread across a metal table. "And the financial tracking?" Renata pulled up displays on multiple screens. "Vanessa's secret account shows regular deposits from Kessler totaling $50,000 over the past 3 months. Additionally, she's been researching property in Miami." "What about Kessler's position at Axion?" "That's where it gets interesting," Bull interjected. "He's been systematically dismantling your security protocols within Phoenix Sentinel since the acquisition. He's replaced key staff with his own people and modified core algorithms." "Which confirms my suspicion," Dominic said, his voice cold. "This was never about acquiring our technology to use it. It was about acquiring it to neutralize it." "Neutralize it for what purpose?" Renata asked. Dominic pulled up a classified document that his military contacts had provided. Axion just secured a $1.2 billion defense contract to protect critical infrastructure. They're using a security system called Aegis Shield. "Never heard of it," Bull frowned. "Because it didn't exist until recently," Dominic explained. "It's Phoenix Sentinel with the serial numbers filed off. Kessler is gutting our company to repurpose our technology without attribution or royalties." "That's corporate theft," Renata said. "Which is precisely what I needed to confirm," Dominic replied. Now we move to Phase 2. The plan Dominic unveiled was breathtaking in its complexity and ruthlessness. First, he had been secretly documenting Kessler's systematic dismantling of Phoenix Sentinel's proprietary technology. Second, he had used his considerable technological skills to create a digital backdoor into Axion systems. "Won't they detect this?" Bull asked. "Not when it's built into the core architecture they're stealing," Dominic explained. "They're so focused on repurposing our technology that they haven't realized I embedded a ghost protocol in the original code, one triggered specifically by the changes they're making." "What does this ghost protocol do?" Renata asked. "It creates an undetectable record of every modification, every file transfer, every stolen piece of intellectual property," Dominic said. "More importantly, it carries a verification signature that proves the original authorship. When activated, It will provide irrefutable evidence of corporate theft on a scale that would not only invalidate the defense contract, but potentially lead to federal charges. Bull whistled. That's the professional side. What about the personal? Dominic's expression hardened. Vanessa believes we're leaving for Bora Bora next Friday. Tickets are booked, resort reserved. What she doesn't know is that only her ticket is confirmed. She'll arrive to find Kessler waiting instead of me. A surprise arranged by her lover to help her relax before asking for the divorce she's been planning. How can you be sure Kessler will be there? Renata asked. Dominic slid across an email printout, a communication between Vanessa and Lawrence planning exactly this scenario. They've been arranging it for weeks. The irony is that they think I'm completely oblivious. And while they're in Bora Bora, Bull pressed. That's when we execute the main phase, Dominic said. With both of them out of the country, we'll activate the Ghost Protocol, documenting every instance of intellectual property theft. Simultaneously, we'll present evidence to the Department of Defense that their new security contractor has built their system on stolen technology. That will destroy Axion, Renata observed. Yes, Dominic agreed without emotion. And when Vanessa and Kessler return, they'll find their carefully constructed future in ruins. What about Isabel? Bull asked quietly. Dominic's expression softened slightly. I've arranged for her to visit MIT and Stanford that week. Universities she's interested in. She'll be isolated from the fallout. And I've established a trust fund for her that neither Vanessa nor I can touch. Her future is secure regardless of what happens. As the meeting concluded, Renata lingered behind. Dominic, I worked with you for 8 years. I've never seen this side of you. That's because it hasn't been necessary until now, he replied simply. Is there any scenario in which you would consider forgiveness? For Isabel's sake, if nothing else. Dominic's eyes turned cold again. Forgiveness requires remorse. Vanessa isn't remorseful for her betrayal, only potentially for its consequences. As for Kessler, he made a fatal error when he targeted my family and my life's work simultaneously. The week before the planned Bora Bora trip, Dominic became the model husband. He brought Vanessa flowers, took her to her favorite restaurants, and even surprised her with a diamond bracelet for their vacation. You've been so attentive lately, Vanessa remarked one evening as they sat on their patio. It reminds me of when we first met. I've been reflecting on what matters, Dominic said, the lie coming easily. I've been too focused on work for too long. Vanessa hesitated, then reached for his hand. I've made mistakes too, Dom. This trip, it's our chance to start fresh. For a moment, Dominic almost felt sorry for her. Almost. Then he remembered the surveillance photos, the secret account, the way she had manipulated their daughter. The momentary doubt hardened into resolve. The night before Vanessa's departure, she found Dominic in his study working late. Coming to bed? She asked, leaning against the doorframe in the silk nightgown he had once found irresistible. Soon, he promised. Just finalizing details for tomorrow. After she left, Dominic opened his safe and removed the divorce papers he had prepared. Tomorrow, while Vanessa boarded a flight, believing he would join her in paradise, these papers would be served to Lawrence Kessler's wife along with comprehensive evidence of her husband's affair. By the time Vanessa landed in Bora Bora to find Kessler waiting instead of her husband, the first domino would already have fallen. By the time she returned, her entire world would be unrecognizable. Dominic closed the safe, a sense of cold satisfaction settling over him. In naval intelligence, he had learned that the most devastating attacks were those the enemy never saw coming until it was too late to counter them. And Vanessa had never truly known the man she had married, or the enemy she had created. Chapter 4, Paradise Lost. The morning of Vanessa's departure dawned with picture-perfect weather, as if nature itself was complicit in Dominic's deception. He drove her to the airport, her Louis Vuitton luggage loaded in the trunk, her excitement palpable as she chattered about the overwater bungalow he had reserved. I still can't believe you're flying in tomorrow, Vanessa said as they approached the departure terminal. The old Dominic would never leave business unfinished. The old Dominic had different priorities, he replied, helping the curbside attendant with her bags. I've realized some things are irreplaceable. The double meaning of his words was lost on her. Vanessa kissed him goodbye, a lingering kiss that might have meant something once. "This trip is going to change everything," she promised. "I'm counting on it," Dominic said with a smile that didn't reach his eyes. As her figure disappeared through the security checkpoint, Dominic checked his watch. In precisely 4 hours, Lawrence Kessler would board his own flight from a private airstrip, believing Vanessa had finally convinced Dominic their marriage was over. What neither of them knew was that Dominic had already set multiple operations in motion, timing each with military precision. He returned his car and made a call. "She's airborne. Initiate sequence 1. At exactly 11 a.m., Yvonne Kessler, Lawrence's wife of 21 years, received a courier delivery at her Pilates class. The package contained comprehensive evidence of her husband's affair with Vanessa, including photographs, hotel receipts, and text message transcripts. Also included were records of financial transactions showing how Lawrence had been diverting marital assets to fund his rendezvous. Accompanying these was a personal note from Dominic expressing his regret at being the bearer of such news, along with contact information for Margaret Walsh, the most ruthless divorce attorney in the state, whose retainer Dominic had already paid. By noon, the Department of Defense received an anonymous but meticulously documented report detailing how Axion's new Aegis Shield security system was built on stolen intellectual property from Phoenix Sentinel. The report included technical specifications proving the theft, along with the Ghost Protocol's verification data that established timeline and ownership. At 12:30 p.m., similar packages arrived at the offices of the SEC, the FBI's Corporate Crimes Division, and 3 national technology journalists known for their exposés on corporate malfeasance. By 1 p.m., as Vanessa's plane crossed the Pacific, Dominic sat in the office of Judge Carlton Wheaton, a former Navy colleague who now presided over the district court, requesting emergency injunctions against Axion for intellectual property theft and expedited divorce proceedings based on documented infidelity. "These are serious allegations, Dominic," Judge Wheaton said, reviewing the evidence, "and highly unusual procedures you're requesting." "The circumstances are unusual, Your Honor," Dominic replied. "The timing is critical. Both parties are currently fleeing the country with illicit funds and stolen intellectual property." By 3 p.m., as Lawrence Kessler's private jet took off, federal agents arrived at Axion headquarters with warrants to secure all servers and documents related to the Aegis Shield project. At 5 p.m., Dominic met with Isabel at her favorite sushi restaurant. She had just returned from her college tours, excited about Stanford's computer science program. "Where's Mom?" she asked, noticing Vanessa's absence. Bora Bora," Dominic replied calmly. "And we need to have an honest conversation." Over the next hour, Dominic explained to his daughter that he and Vanessa would be divorcing. He detailed Vanessa's affair with Lawrence Kessler, showing her select evidence that didn't expose her mother's worst behaviors but established the truth. Isabel's initial shock gave way to tears, then anger. "Is that why you've been asking about Callum? To get evidence for your divorce?" "No," Dominic said firmly. "That was about making sure you were safe. Which brings me to another matter. You used lies about debate team to cover for your mother's affair. Did she ask that of you directly?" Isabel looked down. "She said it would just upset you if you knew she was going out with her friends so often." "I didn't know about him." "I believe you," Dominic said, reaching for her hand. "But from now on, complete honesty between us. No exceptions." "What happens now?" Isabel asked, her voice small. "Now I protect what matters most. You and what I've built," Dominic replied. "Your mother has made her choice. We'll make ours." Later that evening, as Vanessa's plane landed in Tahiti for her final connection to Bora Bora, Dominic received a call from Bull. "The DoD has frozen the Aegis Shield contract pending investigation," Bull reported. "Axion stock has already dropped 17% in after-hours trading. The board has called an emergency meeting for tomorrow morning." "And Kessler's wife?" "Filed for divorce 2 hours ago with Margaret Walsh." Judge Wheaton granted the emergency petition to freeze all marital assets. "Kessler's accounts are locked down tight." Dominic smiled coldly. Perfect timing. In the South Pacific, Vanessa deplaned in Bora Bora, expecting to find a resort representative holding a sign for Mr. and Mrs. Voss. Instead, she found Lawrence Kessler waiting with champagne and a smug smile that suggested he had orchestrated the perfect romantic surprise. What neither of them yet realized was that the paradise they had envisioned, a new life funded by Dominic's wealth and built on Axian's stolen success, was already crumbling like a sandcastle at high tide. 12 hours later, as Vanessa and Lawrence sipped champagne in their overwater bungalow, blissfully unaware of the destruction unfolding thousands of miles away, Dominic executed the final element of Sequence 1. He personally delivered a package to Meredith Sinclair, Axian's ambitious CFO who had always resented Lawrence's meteoric rise. The package contained irrefutable evidence that Lawrence had been systematically embezzling from Axian's R&D budget to fund his personal expenses and affair with Vanessa. "This is extraordinary," Meredith said, paging through the documents. "Why bring this to me instead of the authorities?" "The authorities already have their copies," Dominic replied. "But I thought Axian deserved the opportunity to address this internally before the media circus begins. I'm still invested in Phoenix Sentinel's success, even if certain leadership decisions have been disappointing." Understanding dawned in Meredith's eyes. "You want me to present this to the board before Lawrence returns?" "I'm simply providing information," Dominic said with calculated modesty. "What Axian does with it is entirely up to its leadership." As he left Meredith's office, Dominic received a text from Renata confirming that Phoenix Sentinel's core engineering team, those who had resisted the Axian integration, had all received job offers from Dominic's new venture, a company incorporated offshore 3 months earlier when his suspicions about Vanessa and Lawrence first solidified. Phase 2 was complete. The destruction of everything Vanessa and Lawrence had plotted was underway. Now it was time for Phase 3, ensuring they could never rebuild from the ashes. Chapter 5, Scorched Earth. 3 days into their Bora Bora getaway, Lawrence Kessler's satellite phone rang as he and Vanessa lounged beside their private infinity pool. The call was from Meredith Sinclair, and her tone immediately signaled catastrophe. "The board has terminated you, effective immediately," she informed him without preamble. "Federal agents have seized the Aegis Shield servers. The DoD contract is suspended pending investigation." Lawrence sat bolt upright. "What investigation? What the hell are you talking about?" "Corporate espionage, intellectual property theft, securities fraud. Take your pick," Meredith replied coldly. "Oh, and the board voted unanimously to cooperate fully with authorities. We're turning over everything, Lawrence." "This is absurd," Lawrence sputtered. "I'm coming back immediately." "I wouldn't," Meredith advised. "The FBI has a warrant for your arrest. Your office has been sealed as a crime scene." As Lawrence processed this, another call came through, this one from his personal attorney, whose news was equally devastating. "Yvonne has filed for divorce," the attorney informed him. "Judge Wheaton has granted an emergency freeze on all your assets, banking, investment accounts, properties, everything. And Lawrence, she knows about Ms. Voss." Vanessa watched Lawrence's face drain of color as he ended the call. "What's happening?" she asked. "Everything's falling apart," he said numbly. "Dominic knows. He must have known for months." Vanessa's blood ran cold. "That's impossible. He's joining us tomorrow. He's been planning this trip for weeks." Lawrence laughed bitterly. "There is no tomorrow, Vanessa. Your husband has destroyed everything while we sat here drinking champagne." 3,000 miles away, Dominic sat in a temporary office he had established in a corporate building owned by one of his military contacts. The space was deliberately Spartan, just a desk, computer setup, and a wall of screens monitoring developments at Axian, the federal investigation, and various financial markers. Bull entered with coffee and a tablet, displaying news headlines. "Axian stock has fallen 62% since the investigation became public. They're facing class action lawsuits from shareholders, and 3 major clients have already suspended their contracts." "And Kessler's personal situation?" Dominic asked. "His assets remain frozen. The forensic accountants Margaret Walsh brought in have documented systematic diversion of marital assets. He'll be lucky if Yvonne doesn't end up with everything." Dominic nodded, satisfied with this dimension of his plan. "What about our new venture?" "Chimera Security is fully operational," Bull confirmed. 70% of Phoenix Sentinel's original engineering team has signed on. The DoD has already reached out about fast-tracking security clearances for the team. And Vanessa? Bull hesitated. She's tried calling you 27 times in the past 6 hours. Text 2. Increasingly desperate. Let her stew, Dominic said coldly. She'll be more receptive to terms when she fully comprehends her situation. Later that day, Dominic met with his divorce attorney, Preston Miles, a former JAG officer known for his ruthless efficiency in high-net-worth divorces. The preliminary hearing is scheduled for next Monday, Preston informed him. Given the documented infidelity and Judge Wheaton's familiarity with the case, I anticipate favorable terms. I want full custody of Isabel, Dominic stated flatly. She's 16, Preston reminded him. The court typically considers the child's preference at that age. I'm aware. I've already discussed it with her. She'll be testifying about her mother's pattern of deception, including how Vanessa manipulated her into providing alibis for the affair. Preston nodded appreciatively. That will be compelling. What about division of assets? I've already secured the intellectual property through Chimera. The offshore accounts were never in Vanessa's name. The house, her jewelry, her car, she can keep them. I want her to have just enough to think she salvaged something, but not enough to ever be comfortable. And Kessler? He'll be returning to face federal charges. Let the system handle him, Dominic said dismissively. His reputation is ruined, his career over, his marriage destroyed. The federal prosecution is simply the formal epilogue to his downfall. 5 days after Vanessa and Lawrence had departed for what they thought would be the beginning of their new life, they returned separately to the ruins of their old ones. Lawrence was arrested at the airport on multiple federal charges related to corporate espionage and securities fraud. Vanessa, arriving on a later flight, found the locks changed at her home and security personnel politely but firmly informing her that she was welcome to collect personal items under supervision, as specified in the temporary order issued by Judge Wheaton. When she finally reached Dominic by phone, his voice was calm and clinical. Welcome back. I trust Bora Bora was everything you hoped for. Dom, please, Vanessa began, her voice breaking. This is insane. We can talk about this. There's nothing to discuss, he interrupted. Preston Miles has the divorce agreement. It's generous, all things considered. You get the house, your vehicles, your personal possessions, and a lump sum that should sustain you comfortably if managed properly. And if I don't sign, then we proceed to trial, where your affair becomes public record, including how you used our daughter to cover your tracks. Isabel will testify, Vanessa. Consider that before you decide. The silence on the other end of the line told Dominic everything he needed to know about her calculation. Why are you doing this? She finally asked, her voice small. People make mistakes, Dom. Marriages hit rough patches. This wasn't a rough patch, Dominic corrected her. This was a calculated betrayal. You approached Kessler 6 months before the acquisition talks. You orchestrated the sale of my company to your lover. You diverted funds to a secret account. You used our daughter as your accomplice. These aren't mistakes, Vanessa. They're choices. I never meant to hurt you, she insisted. No, Dominic agreed coldly. You simply meant to use me until you didn't need me anymore. The error in your calculation was thinking I wouldn't notice or that I wouldn't respond decisively when I did. Before she could respond, he added, the divorce hearing is Monday at 9. Preston will email the details. I suggest you find adequate representation. As he ended the call, Dominic felt neither satisfaction nor sorrow. This was simply the execution of a necessary operation, surgical, precise, and proportional to the threat. That evening, Isabel returned from staying with a friend to find Dominic waiting in the kitchen of the modern downtown loft he had purchased the previous month, a fresh start for both of them. Mom called me, she said, setting down her backpack. She was crying, saying you've turned me against her. And what did you tell her? Dominic asked, continuing to prepare dinner as if they were discussing the weather. That she turned me against her when she made me lie for her. Isabel replied with a maturity that made Dominic proud despite the circumstances. She said you're being cruel, that normal people try to work through problems. Dominic set down the knife he was using to chop vegetables. Do you think I'm being cruel? Isabel considered this seriously. I think you're being you, Dad. When someone crosses a line with you, there's no going back. That's how you've always been. Does that disappoint you? No, she said after a moment. It makes me feel safe, actually, because I know you'd do anything to protect what matters to you. Dominic nodded, understanding the implicit message. She needed to know she still mattered to him, that she wasn't collateral damage in his war against her mother. You are what matters most, Isabel, he said simply. Everything else can burn if it means keeping you safe and securing your future. Later that night, after Isabel had gone to bed, Dominic received a call from Bull. Lawrence Kessler is requesting a meeting. Denied, Dominic said automatically. He says he has information about Vanessa you don't know, something that will be relevant before the divorce is finalized. Dominic considered this. Kessler was desperate, facing financial ruin and potential imprisonment. This was likely a ploy to negotiate some form of leniency. Arrange it, he finally decided. Neutral location, full security protocols. The following morning, Dominic met Lawrence Kessler in a private room at the Federal Detention Center where he awaited trial. Gone was the polished executive who had smugly pursued Vanessa at the award ceremony. In his place sat a hollow-eyed man in a jumpsuit, the consequences of his choices etched on his face. Make it quick, Dominic said without preamble. You have 5 minutes of my time. You've been thorough, Lawrence acknowledged, a hint of professional admiration in his voice. More thorough than I anticipated. But there's something you missed about Vanessa. I doubt that, Dominic replied coldly. Lawrence slid a folder across the table. I wasn't her first, just her most ambitious. Dominic opened the folder to find evidence of 2 previous affairs Vanessa had conducted. One with a tennis instructor 3 years earlier, another with a business associate of Dominic's the year before meeting Lawrence. Why show me this? Dominic asked, his expression unchanged. Because she'll do it again, Lawrence said simply. She's already reached out to my attorney about helping fund my defense in exchange for certain considerations when this is over. Dominic actually smiled at this. You still don't understand, do you? There is no when this is over for you. There's no redemption arc, no comeback story. You're finished, Lawrence. Professionally, financially, personally finished. And so is she, Lawrence said, a hint of his old arrogance returning. That's what you want, isn't it? To make sure she never recovers from this either. Dominic stood, gathering the folder. What I want is irrelevant. What matters is the consequence of betrayal. You both made your choices. Now you live with the results. As Dominic turned to leave, Lawrence called after him. She never loved either of us, you know. We were just resources to be exploited. Dominic paused at the door. I know. The difference between us is that I figured it out before she was finished with me. This new information about Vanessa's past infidelities didn't change Dominic's plans, but it reinforced his conviction. Phase 3 would proceed as scheduled, ensuring that neither Vanessa nor Lawrence could ever rebuild from the systematic destruction he had orchestrated. The scorched earth policy was nearly complete. All that remained was the final confrontation. Chapter 6, No Quarter. The Monday morning of the divorce hearing dawned clear and cold, a fitting atmosphere for the clinical dismantling of 12 years of marriage. Dominic arrived early, immaculately dressed in a charcoal suit that projected quiet authority. Preston Miles sat beside him reviewing documents while they waited for Vanessa and her attorney. She's retained Carol Dawson, Preston informed him. Excellent reputation, specializes in high-asset divorces. She'll push hard for more favorable terms. Let her, Dominic replied confidently. The evidence is irrefutable, and Judge Wheaton has seen it all. When Vanessa entered, Dominic noted the strategic choices in her appearance. Conservative navy dress, minimal jewelry, hair pulled back in a modest style. She was playing the role of the remorseful wife who had made a single mistake in an otherwise devoted marriage. The performance was flawless. Had he not uncovered her pattern of betrayal, he might almost have believed it. Carol Dawson approached their table before the proceedings began. Mr. Miles, Mr. Voss, I believe we can save everyone considerable time and emotional strain if we discuss amending certain terms. Preston looked to Dominic, who nodded once. Well, listen, but I should warn you that my client's position is firm. Carol outlined their counterproposal. Vanessa would accept the division of assets as outlined, but requested joint custody of Isabel and an additional stipend for transitional support given the length of the marriage. The custody arrangement is non-negotiable, Dominic stated flatly. Isabel has expressed her preference clearly, and given the documented manipulation of my daughter by Mrs. Voss, no judge would rule in her favor. As for the transitional support, Preston added, the proposed settlement already exceeds what would typically be awarded given the circumstances of infidelity and attempted financial concealment. Carol's professional smile never wavered. Then I'm afraid we have no choice but to proceed with a full hearing, where all aspects of the marriage will be examined, including Mr. Voss's frequent absences and emotional unavailability, which created the conditions for my client's admittedly poor judgment. It was a standard negotiating tactic, the threat of mutually assured destruction through public airing of private grievances. Dominic had anticipated this approach. Proceed as you see fit, Ms. Dawson, he replied calmly. I should mention that the settlement offer expires when Judge Wheaton enters the courtroom. After that, we will pursue the maximum penalty provisions under state law for matrimonial misconduct, including complete forfeiture of marital assets. The threat was clear: push this to trial, and Vanessa would lose everything. The current offer, while not generous, would at least leave her with a home and financial cushion. Carol conferred briefly with Vanessa, whose composed facade was beginning to crack. After a tense exchange, the attorney returned. My client will accept the original terms with one amendment. She would like visitation rights with Isabel to be arranged at their mutual convenience. Dominic considered this request. It cost him nothing to agree, and Isabel was old enough to manage her own relationship with her mother. Acceptable, provided such arrangements are made directly between Isabel and her mother without my required involvement. Minutes later, Judge Wheaton entered and was informed that the parties had reached an agreement. The proceedings were brief and formal. The legal dismantling of their marriage executed with the same efficiency that characterized everything in Dominic's life. As they exited the courtroom, Vanessa approached Dominic directly for the first time. Can we speak privately? She asked, her voice controlled but strained. Dominic nodded to Preston, who discreetly moved away to give them space in the corridor. I know you hate me right now, Vanessa began. I don't hate you, Dominic corrected her. Hate requires emotional investment. I simply recognized a threat and neutralized it. Vanessa flinched at his clinical tone. 12 years, Dom. We built a life together, had a child together. Does none of that matter? It mattered to me, he replied evenly. It apparently didn't matter enough to you. People make mistakes. As Lawrence showed me, this wasn't a mistake. It was a pattern, Dominic interrupted. 3 affairs that I know of, Vanessa. 3. And each time, you used our daughter to cover your tracks. The color drained from Vanessa's face. He told you about David, the tennis instructor? Yes. And Michael before him. The only real question is whether there were others I still don't know about. Vanessa's composure finally broke. What do you want from me, Dom? To beg? To grovel? Would that satisfy whatever this is? I don't want anything from you, Dominic said simply. That's the point you keep missing. Our transaction is complete. The papers are signed. We're finished. And Isabel? You're turning her against me. Isabel is 16, not 6. She can form her own judgments based on the facts. The fact is, you used her as an accomplice in your deception. That was your choice, not mine. As Vanessa struggled to formulate a response, Dominic checked his watch. I have a meeting with the Department of Defense in 40 minutes. The new company is taking off faster than expected. The calculated dismissal was devastating in its casualness. In a matter of weeks, Dominic had systematically dismantled everything Vanessa had plotted for over a year, while simultaneously rebuilding his professional future. He was already moving forward while she was still grappling with the wreckage. This isn't over, Vanessa said, desperation giving way to anger. You don't just get to decide, everything ends on your terms. For the first time, Dominic smiled, a cold empty expression that never reached his eyes. But that's exactly what's happened, Vanessa. You chose the battlefield when you decided to betray me. I simply chose the weapons and timing of the engagement. And now it's over, whether you accept that reality or not. As he walked away, leaving her standing alone in the courthouse corridor, Dominic felt the weight of the past year lifting. The operation was complete. The threat neutralized. The betrayal avenged. Later that afternoon, as he sat in a secured conference room at the Pentagon, walking DoD officials through Chimera Security's enhanced architecture for critical infrastructure protection, Dominic received a text from Bull. Lawrence Kessler has agreed to testify against Axion executives in exchange for reduced charges. Full cooperation. The final piece had fallen into place. Lawrence had chosen self-preservation over loyalty to Axion, ensuring the complete dismantling of the corporate entity that had facilitated his affair with Vanessa. By turning state's evidence, he had secured a lighter sentence but guaranteed his permanent exile from the corporate world. As for Vanessa, she would soon discover that the generous settlement had invisible strings attached. The house she had been awarded was leveraged against Sentinel stock, which was now worthless following the Axion implosion. The vehicles were leased through a corporate entity that was being dissolved. The jewelry she had kept was insured through a policy that had lapsed during the proceedings. She would be left with just enough to maintain appearances briefly, but within 6 months, her financial situation would become increasingly desperate. By design, she would experience exactly the insecurity and vulnerability she had tried to inflict on him. Dominic had learned in naval intelligence that true victory wasn't achieved by destroying an enemy completely. It was achieved by leaving them intact enough to serve as a visible warning to others who might consider following the same path. Vanessa and Lawrence would be those warnings, living testaments to the cost of betraying Dominic Voss's trust. Chapter 7. Calculated Ruins. 6 months after the divorce, Dominic stood at the floor-to-ceiling windows of Chimera Security's new headquarters, overlooking the city from 40 floors up. The company had expanded rapidly, securing contracts that Axion had lost in the wake of the scandal, recruiting top talent from across the industry, and establishing itself as the premier security solution for critical infrastructure. Bull entered carrying 2 cups of coffee, handing one to Dominic. The DoD just awarded us the paramount contract, $3.2 billion over 7 years. Dominic nodded, allowing himself a moment of professional satisfaction. An integration team, ready to deploy next week. We've also finalized the acquisition of NetGuard's quantum encryption division. Signed the papers this morning. This was the culmination of Phase 3, rebuilding stronger than before, using the wreckage of Axion and Phoenix Sentinel as the foundation for something far more powerful and secure. Any word on Kessler? Dominic asked, turning from the view. Sentenced yesterday. 4 years in a minimum security facility, plus restitution of $6 million to Axion shareholders. Bull hesitated before adding, his testimony implicated most of Axion's executive team. The company's being broken up and sold off in pieces. In his personal situation, divorce finalized last month. Yvonne got everything. Houses, investments, even his vintage car collection. Margaret Walsh was ruthless. Dominic sipped his coffee, feeling nothing but clinical satisfaction at the precision of his plan's execution. Lawrence Kessler had been systematically dismantled, professionally, financially, and personally. The punishment had been proportional to the offense. What about Vanessa? Dominic asked, though he already knew most of the details from the discreet surveillance he maintained. The foreclosure on the house goes through next week, Bull reported. She tried to sell her jewelry collection, but discovered the appraisals were inflated. They're worth about 1/3 of what she thought. She's been applying for marketing positions, but hasn't found anything substantial. This, too, was by design. Dominic had made subtle but effective calls to contacts throughout the industry, ensuring that Vanessa's employment prospects remained limited to entry-level positions far below her previous lifestyle. She's been reaching out to Isabel more frequently, Bull added. Try to convince her to ask you for financial help. And how did Isabel respond? She told Vanessa that she needed to solve her own problems. Said she learned from you that actions have consequences. Dominic felt a genuine smile form, the first in months. Isabel had flourished in the aftermath of the divorce, throwing herself into school and early college courses. Her relationship with Dominic had deepened into one of mutual respect and honest communication. She had even brought Callum to dinner, and while Dominic had reservations about the age difference, he recognized that the young man genuinely cared for his daughter. "Sir," Renata interrupted from the doorway, "your 2 o'clock is here." "Patrick Sinclair from the NSA." "Thank you, Renata. Show him in." As Bull departed, he paused. "One more thing. Lawrence Kessler left a message through his attorney. He wants to meet before reporting to prison next month." "Denied," Dominic said without hesitation. "There's nothing more to discuss." The meeting with the NSA representative went smoothly, opening doors to classified contracts that would cement Chimera's position in the security landscape for years to come. As Dominic walked Patrick out, they passed the operations center where dozens of engineers worked on Chimera's evolved architecture. Phoenix Sentinel Reborn with enhanced capabilities and stronger protections. "Impressive operation," Patrick commented. "Hard to believe you built this from scratch in less than a year." "Not from scratch," Dominic corrected him. "From the lessons of what came before." That evening, as Dominic prepared dinner at his loft, Isabel returned from debate practice, for real this time, having rejoined the team and led them to state finals. "Dad, have you seen this?" she asked, showing him a news alert on her phone. The headline read, "Former Axion executive found dead in apparent suicide." Dominic took the phone, reading about how Arnold Reeves, Axion's former CTO, who had been indicted alongside Lawrence Kessler, had taken his own life rather than face trial. "Did you know him?" Isabel asked. "We met several times during the acquisition," Dominic replied, returning her phone. "He was the one who implemented most of the changes to Phoenix Sentinel's architecture. Do you feel bad about what happened to him?" The question was direct, typical of Isabel's unflinching approach to difficult subjects. Dominic considered his answer carefully. "I regret that he made choices that led to this outcome," he said finally. "But he was an adult who knowingly participated in corporate theft on a massive scale. The consequences were proportional to those actions." Isabel studied him. "Mom called today. She's moving to Cincinnati to live with her sister. Says she can't afford to stay here anymore." Dominic nodded, absorbing this information without visible reaction. Cincinnati would place Vanessa far from their daily lives, another calculated outcome rather than a coincidence. "Will you miss her?" he asked, genuinely curious about his daughter's emotional state. Isabel considered this. "I miss who I thought she was, not who she turned out to be." The wisdom in her response made Dominic proud. She was learning to distinguish between sentiment and reality, a skill that would serve her well. Later that night, after Isabel had gone to bed, Dominic received an unexpected call from an unlisted number. Against his better judgment, he answered. "Mr. Voss," Carol Dawson's voice came through. "I apologize for contacting you directly, but I felt obligated given the circumstances." "What circumstances, Ms. Dawson?" Dominic asked, immediately alert. "I've been trying to reach Vanessa regarding some final paperwork, but she's not responding. Her sister called me today, concerned. Apparently, Vanessa left a rather disturbing message suggesting she might harm herself." Dominic absorbed this information, calculating potential scenarios and appropriate responses. "I see. Have you contacted local authorities?" "Yes, they conducted a welfare check, but didn't find her at the house. Her car is gone. Her phone goes straight to voicemail." "I appreciate the information, Ms. Dawson, but I'm not sure what you expect me to do. Our marriage is dissolved. Her welfare is no longer my concern." There was a pause before Carol responded. "With respect, Mr. Voss, while that may be technically true from a legal standpoint, Vanessa is still Isabel's mother. Whatever happens to her will affect your daughter. The manipulation was transparent, but effective." Dominic had calculated every aspect of Vanessa's downfall except this one, the potential impact of her complete self-destruction on Isabel. "I'll make some calls," he finally said. Not for Vanessa's sake, but for Isabel's. After ending the call, Dominic contacted Bull and outlined the situation. "Use whatever resources necessary to locate her. If she's genuinely at risk, have her brought to Westlake Psychiatric for evaluation. Charge it to my private account. Bull, to his credit, asked no questions about why Dominic would help the woman who had betrayed him so thoroughly. He simply acknowledged the directive and went to work. 3 hours later, Bull reported back. Using Chimera's tracking capabilities, they had located Vanessa's car at the Harbor View Hotel, an establishment known for catering to those contemplating their final exit. Security footage showed her checking in alone, carrying a small bag and appearing distressed. Local police are en route, Bull informed him. Hotel security has been alerted without alarming her. Dominic should have felt nothing, or perhaps satisfaction that his systematic dismantling of Vanessa's life had brought her to this point of desperation. Instead, he felt a strange hollowness. This outcome, while within the calculated parameters of his revenge, served no further purpose. Vanessa's death would not advance his objectives. It would only complicate Isabel's emotional recovery. Keep me updated, he instructed Bull. If they find her in time, ensure she receives proper psychiatric care. If not, he paused, considering the implications. If not, manage the media coverage to minimize impact on Isabel. The following morning, Dominic waited in his kitchen, coffee in hand, for news about Vanessa. Bull had texted at 2:17 a.m. confirming that police had found her unconscious but alive, having consumed a combination of alcohol and prescription medication. She had been transported to University Hospital and was in stable condition. When Isabel emerged for breakfast, Dominic made a decision. There's something you need to know, he said carefully. Your mother is in the hospital. She attempted to harm herself last night. Isabel's face paled. Is she going to be okay? Physically, yes. Mentally, she'll need treatment. I've arranged for her to receive care at Westlake. It's the best psychiatric facility in the region. Confusion crossed Isabel's features. You arranged it? Why would you help her after everything she did? Dominic set down his coffee. Because despite everything, she's still your mother, and your well-being remains my priority. Later that day, Dominic visited Westlake Psychiatric, not to see Vanessa, but to meet with her treatment team. He established financial arrangements for her care, with two non-negotiable conditions: complete psychiatric evaluation and mandatory therapy for a minimum of 6 months. He also stipulated that Isabel could visit if she chose to, but only in a supervised therapeutic setting. As he was leaving, he encountered Vanessa's sister, Michelle, in the lobby. I never thought I'd say this, Michelle began, her tone a mixture of gratitude and lingering resentment. But thank you for helping her. I'm not helping her, Dominic clarified. I'm ensuring Isabel doesn't lose her mother completely. Those are different objectives. Michelle studied him. You know, I always wondered what Vanessa saw in you. You seem so controlled, so detached. Now I understand. You see everything as a strategic operation, don't you? Even emotions. Emotions are unpredictable variables, Dominic acknowledged. I prefer to work with known quantities. Is that why you destroyed her so completely? Because she introduced an unpredictable variable into your equation. Dominic considered this characterization. I didn't destroy Vanessa. I simply removed my support, which revealed the hollowness of what she had built for herself. Everything that followed was the natural consequence of her own choices. As Michelle absorbed this cold assessment, Dominic added, Vanessa will receive the best care available. When she's stabilized, she'll have resources to establish a modest but sustainable life in Cincinnati. Not for her sake, but for Isabel's. That's my final calculation in this equation. With that, Dominic departed, leaving Michelle staring after him with the dawning realization that the man her sister had betrayed operated on a level of strategic thinking few could comprehend, and fewer still could counter once provoked. The ruins of what had once been his marriage, his company, and his trust had been calculated down to the smallest detail. And from those ruins, he had built something stronger, more secure, and entirely under his control, just as he had always intended. Chapter 8, Reckonings. 9 months after Vanessa's hospitalization, life had settled into a new normal. Chimera security had expanded globally, with offices in London, Singapore, and Dubai. The Pentagon had classified Phoenix Sentinel's successor program as a critical national security asset. and Dominic had established himself as the preeminent authority on infrastructure security, testifying before congressional committees and advising foreign governments. Isabel had been accepted to Stanford with a full academic scholarship, her debate championship and perfect SAT scores opening doors that even Dominic's influence couldn't have secured. She had matured through the crucible of family trauma, emerging as a thoughtful young woman who balanced her father's analytical precision with an emotional intelligence all her own. On a crisp autumn morning, Dominic sat in his office reviewing quarterly projections when Renata appeared in his doorway. "There's a Philip Harrington here to see you," she said, her tone suggesting uncertainty. "He doesn't have an appointment, but he says it's urgent and personal." The name triggered immediate recognition. Philip Harrington was Lawrence Kessler's former attorney, the one who had represented him during the federal investigation. "Send him in," Dominic decided, curious about what would bring Kessler's attorney to his door unannounced. Philip entered, briefcase in hand, looking considerably more worn than when Dominic had last seen him across a negotiation table. "Mr. Voss, thank you for seeing me without an appointment," he began, taking the seat Dominic indicated. "I'm here on a rather unusual errand." "I assumed as much," Dominic replied. "Lawrence Kessler is still serving his sentence at Allenwood, correct?" "He is. 8 months into a 4-year term." Philip placed his briefcase on the desk and opened it. "However, Mr. Kessler's health has declined significantly. He's been diagnosed with an aggressive form of pancreatic cancer. The prognosis is not favorable." Dominic absorbed this information without visible reaction. "I'm sorry to hear that. However, I fail to see how this concerns me." "Mr. Kessler knows he has limited time," Philip continued, removing a sealed envelope from his briefcase. "He asked me to deliver this to you personally, along with a verbal message." "Which is," he said, "tell Vossi one." "Completely. But there's something he doesn't know, something that will matter to him." Philip placed the envelope on the desk. "I'm merely the messenger, Mr. Voss. Whatever is in that envelope, I have no knowledge of its contents." Dominic made no move to touch the envelope. "Is there anything else?" Philip hesitated. "Only that Mr. Kessler expressed something close to admiration for how thoroughly you dismantled everything he had built. He called it a masterclass in strategic warfare." After the attorney departed, Dominic stared at the sealed envelope for several minutes. Finally, he picked it up, weighed it in his hand, then used a letter opener to slice it open precisely. Inside was a single USB drive and a handwritten note that read, "You deserve to know the full truth. This isn't atonement. It's acknowledgement of a superior strategist." "Okay." Dominic inserted the drive into a secure, isolated laptop he kept for reviewing potentially compromised data. The drive contained a single video file dated 3 weeks before the awards ceremony, where he had overheard Vanessa's betrayal. The video showed Lawrence and Vanessa in what appeared to be a hotel suite. They were not alone. With them was Barrett Sinclair, the ambitious executive who had replaced Dominic as head of security integration after the Axion acquisition. "Are you sure Voss has no idea?" Barrett was asking, pouring champagne. "None," Vanessa confirmed, accepting a glass. "Dom is brilliant with systems, but oblivious to people. He trusts me completely." "And the daughter?" Lawrence inquired. "Isabel thinks I'm having an affair," Vanessa laughed. "She's covering for me because she thinks that's all it is, just a fling with some tennis instructor I hired as cover. She has no idea about the real plan." "Let's review the timeline then," Barrett said, all business. Lawrence acquires Sentinel through Axion. Vanessa files for divorce after the money transfers clear. I step in as head of security integration and implement the modifications to Phoenix Sentinel's architecture. Then we sell the compromised system to the Koreans. "The Chinese," Lawrence corrected. "They're offering substantially more. 200 million, split 3 ways. "And Dominic?" Barrett asked. "What about him?" Vanessa replied with chilling indifference. "Once the divorce is final and the technology is sold, he becomes irrelevant. He'll be financially secure, but professionally ruined when the security breach is traced back to his original code." "And if he fights the divorce?" Lawrence asked. Vanessa smiled coldly. Then we implement contingency plan B. Isabel has been recording his late-night work sessions for months, at my suggestion, because I told her I was worried about his mental health. The recordings show him talking to himself, working through security scenarios that, taken out of context, could easily be framed as paranoid delusions. Add in a few strategic prescriptions for sleep aids that can have psychological side effects, and we have everything needed to question his stability. The casual cruelty of the plan, using his own daughter to gather material that could be weaponized against him, struck Dominic like a physical blow. This wasn't just betrayal. It was a comprehensive campaign to destroy him professionally and personally. The video continued for another 20 minutes, detailing more aspects of their plan, including how they would systematically dismantle his reputation in the industry after the security breach was discovered. When the video ended, Dominic sat motionless, processing this new information. The plan he had overheard and disrupted had been far more sinister than a simple affair in corporate acquisition. It had been a coordinated attack designed to leave him professionally destroyed, possibly institutionalized, while his life's work was sold to foreign adversaries. He checked the metadata on the video file, confirming its authenticity. This was no fabrication. It was genuine surveillance footage, likely taken by Lawrence as insurance against his co-conspirators. Dominic reached for his phone and called Bull. "I need everything we have on Barrett Sinclair," he said without preamble. "Current location, employment, assets, everything." "The guy from Axion?" Bull asked, confusion evident in his voice. "He left the company right after the scandal broke. Moved to Toronto, last I heard." "Find him," Dominic said simply. "I've just learned that our operation was incomplete." Within an hour, Bull had compiled a comprehensive profile on Barrett Sinclair. After leaving Axion, he had indeed relocated to Toronto, where he had established a consultancy specializing in cybersecurity for financial institutions. He had carefully distanced himself from the Axion scandal, positioning himself as a whistleblower who had recognized anomalies in the Aegis Shield architecture but had been ignored by senior management. By all appearances, Barrett had not only escaped the destruction that had claimed Lawrence and Vanessa, but had leveraged the situation to enhance his professional standing. His consultancy was thriving, with clients including 3 of Canada's largest banks and several international financial institutions. He's scheduled to speak at the International Security Conference in Washington next month, Bull reported. First public appearance in the U.S. since the Axion implosion. "Perfect," Dominic said, a cold determination settling over him. "Arrange a meeting with our legal team tomorrow morning. And contact Judge Wheaton. Tell him I need to discuss a matter of national security." The operation that Dominic designed over the next week was elegant in its precision. Unlike the scorched earth approach he had employed with Vanessa and Lawrence, this would be a surgical strike, focused, contained, and devastating. First, he provided the video evidence to federal prosecutors, who immediately opened an investigation into Barrett's role in the attempted sale of classified security technology to foreign entities. Judge Wheaton expedited the warrants needed to access Barrett's communications and financial records. Second, Dominic's team identified a pattern of suspicious transactions between Barrett's consultancy and shell companies linked to foreign intelligence services. Transactions that Barrett had carefully disguised, but that Phoenix Sentinel's advanced tracking algorithms easily unraveled. Third, Dominic personally briefed the Director of National Intelligence on the threat Barrett represented, leveraging his status as a trusted security advisor to ensure the matter received highest priority. The trap was set. When Barrett Sinclair arrived in Washington for the security conference, he was met at the airport by federal agents and taken into custody on charges of espionage, conspiracy, and wire fraud. The evidence against him was overwhelming, the case airtight. Unlike Lawrence, who had been permitted to plead to lesser charges, Barrett would face the full weight of federal prosecution for attempting to sell classified security technology to foreign adversaries. The potential sentence: life in a supermax facility. The day after Barrett's arrest, Dominic received a call from Lawrence Kessler's prison physician, informing him that Lawrence had passed away during the night, his illness progressing more rapidly than expected. His last request had been confirmation that Dominic had received his package. He said to tell you, now the ledger is balanced, the physician related. Dominic thanked him for the call, then sat in silence for several minutes. The man who had conspired with his wife to destroy him was gone. The third conspirator was facing justice. The operation was truly complete. That evening, when Isabel returned from dinner with friends, she found Dominic on the terrace, contemplating the city lights. "Everything okay, Dad?" she asked, joining him. "You seem, I don't know, different tonight." "I received some information today," Dominic said carefully, "about your mother, Lawrence Kessler, and a third person named Barrett Sinclair. Their plan was more extensive than I initially understood." Isabel tensed. "What do you mean?" "They were planning to sell Phoenix Sentinel's architecture to foreign entities. And they were going to use recordings you made of me as evidence that I was mentally unstable if I contested the divorce." The color drained from Isabel's face. "Recordings? I never." Understanding dawned in her eyes. "Mom asked me to record you working late. She said she was worried about how hard you were pushing yourself, that she wanted to convince you to see someone about potential burnout. You didn't know," Dominic assured her. "You were being manipulated, just as I suspected." Tears formed in Isabel's eyes. "I helped her betray you without even knowing it." "No," Dominic said firmly. "You were another victim of her deception. The responsibility is hers, not yours." As Isabel processed this revelation, Dominic added, "Barrett Sinclair was arrested today. The full extent of their conspiracy will become public knowledge soon. I wanted you to hear it from me first." "What about Mom?" Isabel asked quietly. "Will she face charges too?" This was the question Dominic had been considering all day. Vanessa was still at Westlake, making progress according to her treatment team. Pursuing federal charges against her would undo that progress and potentially devastate Isabel further. "No," he decided. "The evidence implicates Barrett and Lawrence primarily. Your mother's involvement, while significant, can be characterized as peripheral. I've spoken with the prosecutors." What he didn't tell Isabel was that this decision wasn't mercy, it was calculation. Vanessa, living with the knowledge of what she had attempted, confined to a modest existence in Cincinnati under her sister's watchful eye, was a more fitting conclusion than a federal prison cell. "Thank you," Isabel said softly. "Not for her sake, but it would have been hard." Dominic nodded, understanding perfectly. Some reckonings don't require legal prosecution. They happen in quieter ways. As they stood together on the terrace, the city lights reflecting in Isabel's eyes, Dominic realized that the pain of betrayal had finally begun to recede. Not because he had forgiven, he hadn't and never would, but because justice had been served in full measure. The operation was complete, the threat neutralized, the future secured, and unlike the conspirators who had targeted him, Dominic Voss remained standing, stronger, more vigilant, and utterly uncompromising in his response to betrayal. Chapter 9. Iron Legacy. 5 years passed. Chimera Security had become the dominant force in global infrastructure protection, with Dominic Voss recognized internationally as a visionary in the field. The company's market valuation had exceeded $20 billion, and its systems protected everything from power grids to financial networks across 6 continents. Isabel had graduated from Stanford with dual degrees in computer science and international relations, joining Chimera as head of their new quantum encryption division despite numerous offers from tech giants and intelligence agencies. At 23, she had already patented 3 security algorithms and published 2 peer-reviewed papers on next-generation threat detection. On a clear spring morning, Dominic sat in his executive suite reviewing the final details of Chimera's largest acquisition to date, a European AI security firm whose neural network technology would integrate seamlessly with Phoenix Sentinel's latest iteration. A knock at his door preceded Bull's entrance. Though they both had significant gray in their hair now, Bull remained Dominic's most trusted lieutenant and confidant. "Package from Cincinnati," Bull said, placing a small box on Dominic's desk. Passed all security protocols. Dominic recognized the handwriting on the label immediately, Vanessa's. In the years since her breakdown, she had maintained minimal contact, sending Isabel birthday and Christmas cards, and occasionally reaching out to Dominic regarding practical matters related to their long-dissolved marriage. After her discharge from Westlake, Vanessa had settled into a quiet life in Cincinnati, working as an assistant manager at an art gallery owned by a friend of her sister's. According to the discreet monitoring Dominic still maintained, she lived modestly in a small apartment, dated occasionally but never seriously, and had developed a reputation as a knowledgeable, if somewhat melancholy presence in the local arts community. Dominic opened the package carefully. Inside was a small wooden box containing his grandfather's pocket watch, a family heirloom he had given Vanessa on their 5th anniversary, which she had taken during the divorce. Accompanying it was a handwritten note. Dominic, I found this while reorganizing my apartment. It belongs in your family, perhaps someday, with Isabel. I have no right to keep it. I won't ask for forgiveness. We both know that door closed long ago. But as I continue my therapy, I'm learning to acknowledge reality rather than hide from it. The reality is that I betrayed not just you, but also our daughter and myself. You were right in everything you said that day at the courthouse. It wasn't a mistake or a momentary lapse. It was a pattern of choices that revealed fundamental flaws in my character. The consequences you ensured I faced were harsh but fair. I've heard about Isabel's success from Michelle, who follows the tech news. You raised an extraordinary daughter, largely without my help. That will always be my greatest regret. Take care of yourself and her. Vanessa. Dominic closed the box containing the watch and returned it to the drawer of his desk. There was no emotion attached to this gesture from Vanessa, no softening of his position, no consideration of what might have been. The watch was a family heirloom that belonged in his possession to eventually pass to Isabel. Vanessa had merely returned what was not hers to keep. Later that afternoon, Dominic attended the quarterly board meeting where Chimera's continued expansion was approved unanimously. As he exited the boardroom, he found Isabel waiting in the executive lounge. How did it go? She asked, falling in a step beside him. Unanimous approval, Dominic replied. The quantum division's projections were particularly impressive. You've done exceptional work. I had a good teacher, Isabel said with a smile. Then, more seriously, I received a card from Mom yesterday. She mentioned she had sent you something. Your great-grandfather's pocket watch, Dominic confirmed. A family heirloom. Isabel nodded, processing this. Do you ever think about her? About what happened? Dominic considered the question carefully. Not in the way you might imagine. I think about the lessons, about trust, verification, and consequences. Those lessons built Chimera and shaped our security philosophy. But not about her as a person, as your wife of 12 years. That person never truly existed. Isabel, Dominic said gently. The woman I believed I married was a construction, partly my projection, partly her deception. The real Vanessa was revealed in her choices and actions. They walked in silence for a moment before Isabel spoke again. Callum proposed last night. Dominic stopped walking, turning to face his daughter. And your answer? I told him I needed to think, Isabel admitted. After everything with you and Mom, I guess I'm cautious about marriage. That's understandable, Dominic acknowledged. But Callum isn't Lawrence Kessler, and you're not Vanessa. Their failures don't predict your future. What would you do if you were me? Dominic chose his words carefully. I would recognize that caution is wisdom, not fear. I would establish verification systems, transparent communication, shared values, mutual respect. And I would remember that trust is earned continuously, not granted permanently. Isabel considered this, then smiled. You just described a security protocol for marriage. The principles are universal, Dominic replied with a rare smile. Whether protecting critical infrastructure or building a life partnership. That evening, they dined together at the revolving restaurant atop the city's tallest building, a tradition they had established for celebrating major company milestones. As they discussed the European acquisition and Isabel's quantum encryption breakthroughs, Dominic felt a profound satisfaction that transcended professional accomplishment. From the ashes of betrayal, he had built not just a corporate empire, but a legacy embodied in his daughter, brilliant, ethical, and clear-eyed about both human potential and human frailty. I've been thinking about Barrett Sinclair, Isabel said unexpectedly as their dessert arrived. His parole hearing is next month. His attorney has been making a case about his exemplary behavior and genuine remorse. Dominic's expression didn't change. The parole board will make their determination based on all relevant factors, including testimony from key witnesses, Isabel noted. They've requested your input as the primary victim of his conspiracy, and I will provide it, Dominic confirmed, with complete accuracy and without emotion. What remained unspoken but understood between them was that Barrett Sinclair would never receive Dominic's support for parole. The betrayal had been too calculated, the potential damage too severe. Like Lawrence before him, Barrett would serve his full sentence, a living reminder of the consequences of crossing Dominic Voss. As they concluded dinner and stepped onto the observation deck overlooking the city where Dominic had built and lost and rebuilt his life, Isabel asked a final question. After everything, the betrayal, the revenge, the rebuilding, was it worth it? Are you satisfied with how it all turned out? Dominic surveyed the cityscape, the lights of Chimera Tower prominent among the skyscrapers. He thought about the empire he had built from the wreckage of betrayal, the daughter who had emerged stronger from family trauma, and the iron reputation he had established as someone who could not be betrayed without severe consequence. Satisfied isn't the right word, he finally answered. I'm aligned. My external reality now matches my internal understanding of how consequences should follow actions. There's a clarity in that alignment that brings a certain peace. Isabel absorbed this characteristically precise answer. And forgiveness? Mom has tried, in her way, to make amends. Forgiveness is overrated, Dominic said simply. Understanding is more valuable. I understand exactly who Vanessa is, who Lawrence was, who Barrett remains. I understand the choices they made and why the consequences they faced were proportional and just. That understanding is complete without forgiveness. As they left the observation deck and descended to where their car waited, Dominic reflected that his response to betrayal had defined not just the past 5 years, but likely the rest of his life. He had not just survived betrayal. He had transformed it into the foundation for something stronger, more resilient, and ultimately more successful than what had been lost. The husband who had overheard his wife renounce their marriage at an awards ceremony had emerged not as a victim, but as an architect of meticulous consequence. The man who had walked away from that overheard conversation with divorce papers already in his briefcase had proven that betrayal was not something he suffered. It was something others would forever regret attempting. And in this iron legacy, Dominic Voss had found not happiness in the conventional sense, but something he valued more highly. Absolute alignment between action and consequence, between betrayal and justice, between the world as it was and the world as it should be. It was, in the final calculation, enough. And there you have it. Another story comes to an end. What did you think? I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments below. If you enjoy this story, consider joining our community by subscribing. It means the world to us. For more stories like this one, check out the recommended videos on screen. And I'll see you there.